Chapter 7, The Pequod Meets the Bachelor. The Pequod Meets the Bachelor. A storm came down on Denver, it cast the sky in white smoke, it howled along the streets, it rattled the houses, it knocked the doors. Thronged by a fence with each iron rod topped by a spike, a mansion more medieval than modern stood as an inviolable bulwark against the gale. Its domed entryway, supported by white columns that stretched to the third story and between which a tall window glowed with yellow light, remained an alcove of relative safety from the bluster, and in it stood a lone figure, stooped, her long ponytail flickering behind her, a gloveless hand cupped around her mouth and another pressed to her ear. She was talking.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I know, I got it. Look, I know. Yeah. I know. Hey. Listen to me. Hey. Yes. Look, no, I said look, yes. Let's just, yeah. Let's just consider this from my perspective. Yeah? I'm doing out everything I can hear. Look, I'm not, yeah. I'm doing everything I've done that. I've done that. Yeah. I got it. Yeah, hold up a sec, someone's coming.
From the mist walked a figure. The girl with the ponytail took her hand from her ear and her other hand from her mouth. She exhaled with a casual shrug as she leaned against one of the entryway's columns. The figure who approached burst out the white and shivered. She wore a witch's hat with a little bend at the tip and held a broomstick on her shoulder.
"How's it?"
said Ponytail Girl.
"Where is Clown Muffle?"
said Witch Hat Girl.
Well, hey, that's a question in it. Say, it's not so polite to walk onto someone's property asking questions. What say we introduce ourselves? I'm Collins, and you?" "Murietta Temecula."
They shook hands, the shake initiated by Collins.
"Mouthful. Mind if I shorten? My friends call me Murray." "Gourette. Love it. Cute name. Now let me be frank with you, Murray, I know exactly who you are. I know you too. You're a moderator on Magnet. Right, you are there, Murray, which I gotta say, and don't take this personally, I gotta say I'm a little concerned you showed up here, because we did kinda ban you from the site. No offense, of course, it was a matter of policy, rules and such, not a personal slight against you, of course."
Few days back, Murietta Temecula came onto the forums and kicked up a fuss about the girl in San Bernardino, known to everyone else as Clown Muffle, or that bitch who gave my costume a 3 out of 10. Murray claimed Clown Muffle murdered a magical girl, which initially moderation took quite seriously, even talked of banning Miss Muffle. But as the discussion continued, details of Murray's story became questionable. First, it was revealed she was unconscious when Clown Muffle supposedly killed her friend Hemet. Then it came to light that Hemet's body was found inside the body of a wraith. Even though everyone usually hated Clown Muffle, the tide of public opinion shifted. What hadn't happened in 5 years suddenly happened, people defended her. Murray got angry. Angry people say mean things. In a few minutes she stacked enough verbal abuse violations to merit the ban. The present, non-cyber Murray rubbed her hands and checked over her shoulder.
"Look, I don't fucking care. I'm looking for Clown Muffle and I know she came here." Wow, that's pretty weird, that, considering she's not actually here. No siree. No clowns or muffles.
Collins lifted a foot and inspected the sole. At which Murray seized Collins by the collar and slammed her into the column.
I hacked her magnet account. She spoke with Denver, Denver sent her a ticket.
With little more than a wrist flick, Collins broke Murray's hold, staggered forward, and bent over laughing. She held her stomach and let her scarf flap in the wind as snowflakes brushed through her ponytail.
Hacked, hacked. Hacked her. You hacked her? You're a hacker? Computer whiz. Jump-started the hard drive? Triangulated the microchip. Look, I broke into her garage and found her password, okay? Okay? I was watching her closely and then she vanished. Stop laughing. Stop laughing, I'm serious. I know she came here, where is she?
It took Collins several minutes to stop laughing. Then she started laughing again. Then she stopped for about a second before laughing again, at which point Murray, frantically watching over her shoulder, levied a kick into Collins' gut that knocked Collins over but did not stop her laughing.
I am in a hurry here.
Every word expelled a white puff of breath.
And why's that, friend? Ha, ha ha, because Cube sent a what's it, a dominatrix after you? That it? Ha 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 ha.
Murray crouched beside Collins. She clapped her hands together like a prayer and shook the fingertips back and forth close to her lips. Her eyes were wide.
Please just tell me. Tell me, where's Clown Muffle? Righty.
Collins pushed herself off the ground in a single 90-degree motion based entirely in the tips of her toes.
You know. Probably not the best idea to tell you that thing. Really, I'm surprised you expected me to just say. Pretty audacious. Love it. I'm pretty stressed right now and this just made my day. You're the best, Murray. I know I laughed, but you're my fave right now.
She pinched two fingers together. Her other hand's forefingers bent like they held something while her thumb flicked up and down. Then she held one hand to the other and pressed the two pinched fingers to her lips. Murray watched, baffled, fidgeting, and kneading her hands around her broomstick. Collins pulled her fingers away and exhaled. White smoke billowed out.
So I'll let you in on a secret. Clown Muffle never came here. I don't believe you. Why not? How'd you what I mean is, even if you knew to come to Denver. How'd you find this house? We don't post our address anywhere, so. I can sense the location of other magical girls.
Collins clapped.
Thought so. So you flew into Denver, picked me up on radar. I know Clown Muffle isn't here right now. I know that. But where did she go? Where did she go? I'm telling you, she never came here. Then where? Chill, chill.
Collins exhaled another puff. She flicked her fingers and then smushed her heel against the ground.
St. Louis. St. Louis. The city. I know no others.
Murray hung her head. She pulled back the front flap of her floppy hat and strained her hair through her fingers. Her bloodshot eyes stared and bits of frost flicked off her as she trembled.
That's far.
She blinked and looked back at Collins.
You could be lying. Could be.
Collins shrugged.
But how would you ever know?
The wind whistled. Murray drilled her fingertips into her temples and tilted back her head. The broomstick rattled in the crook of her neck.
Got a couple of friends of my own in St. Louis right now, said Collins. Maybe you can lend 'em a hand, yeah? Or maybe the person following you can.
At that, Murray whipped her head around and stared into the snowdrifts as though she expected someone to emerge that instant behind her. But nobody emerged and she said, "Cubes? I need grief cubes. I just flew here, it took hours, I can't fly more without them. Please miss. I know I don't deserve anything but, I'll pay you." She rifled through her cloak and withdrew a quivering wallet.
No need, no need. Come on, I'm not gonna let a poor girl in the cold go without cubes. Sit tight a sec, I'll be right back, no payment necessary.
A flick of her wrist signaled a temporary farewell as Collins dipped through the front door of the mansion and let it click closed behind her. Murray remained in the entryway. She looked over her shoulder at the location of mountains that would have existed if not for the storm. She rubbed her neck and then her jaw, she ran her fingers through her hair and brushed snowflakes from her shoulders. She held her stomach and after 2 minutes she started to pace. Her shoes kicked the snow that sifted under the dome. She wrapped her arms around herself and unwrapped them. She took off her hat with the little bend and flipped it upside down, right side up. She stuck her hand in it as deep as it would go and tried to straighten the little bend, but it flopped back over every time. She placed her hands over her face and almost slipped on the slush but managed to catch herself on one of the columns. She rolled her broomstick around an outstretched arm and tried to catch it, but it slipped out her fingers and clattered to the floor. She stooped immediately to pick it up, but her numb fingers failed to close around it. Instead they batted it into the gale and she had to clutch her hand to her hat and scoop it back. She slapped the broom part against the ground to knock the snow out and pulled her phone out of her pocket to check the time. Every 5 seconds her eyes shifted toward the smoky white beyond.
"Shit!"
she said. She stormed into the snow, positioned herself astride her broomstick, hunched on her knees, and prepared to take off. At that moment the door slammed open and Collins came out waving a hand that glittered with black cubes over her head.
"Yo! What took you so long? Gimme those!"
Murray waddled back to her with the broom still between her thighs and snatched the cubes from Collins the moment they entered snatching distance. The cubes vanished into the folds of her cloak.
"Aw, don't mention it. It's what we do in Denver. We're friends to all magical girls, ya know."
But Murray already reassumed liftoff position. She scanned one frantic eye into the white and kicked her feet to jerk airborne. Her toes no longer touched the ground and the wind cast her leftward before she stabilized and hovered. She glanced over her shoulder at Collins.
"Thank you."
Collins stuck out her tongue and waved. Murray shot into the sky. Stefvio, the girl from Hemet, taught Murietta Temecula everything she knew about being a magical girl. Since San Bernardino or Clown Muffle or whatever stupid name she called herself was too busy murdering people to string any advice beyond
hit the enemy until they die,
and Murray's hitting things potential sucked, it was a rough 2 weeks before she met Hemet. It was Hemet who explained this crucial tidbit.
"Grief cubes are a magical girl's energy. But you still have to take care of your body's energy needs with food and drink. If you don't, it'll cause your soul gem to darken more rapidly."
Well, she didn't phrase it exactly that way. In fact, she was prone to silence. When she did speak, even if they were alone, she used telepathy. But it wasn't from disdain for Murray, unlike Clown Muffle's silence. Hemet just disliked talking. Nonetheless, she made an effort and Murray eagerly pieced her fragments into coherent policy. The cubes Collins gave her helped a lot. But she had to cross 2 whole states to reach St. Louis, and she needed energy to fight Clown Muffle afterward. With the entity she sensed from time to time drawing ever nearer, Murray lacked time to harvest more cubes. She burnt through her stockpile on the trek from San Bernardino to Denver. But if she lacked cubes, she could at least stem the hemorrhage with some food. She touched down in a smidge of prairie town, her battered road map identified as Burlington, near the Colorado-Kansas border. She had escaped the storm, but darkness covered her as she dropped into an alley behind a fast food joint.
"Well, look at that,"
said the old lady behind the register.
"That's an unusual costume."
Murray, aboard a broomstick for hours, had time to consider her cover story if she approached a muggle while transformed.
"I'm in a school play, we're performing Macbeth. You know, with the witches." "Ah! Love that play. Double, double, toil and trouble. That's the line. But rehearsal's running late, so they need me to snag some food. What's the biggest order of chicken nuggets? What's the biggest order of chicken nuggets you got? Fries, drink too."
A lot of food, but she figured these kind of places had chicken nuggets and fries already in the fryer, waiting to get dumped into a box. Cheap, immediate caloric content to sustain her across tornado country. Things got too close in Denver while she waited for Collins, but since then she managed to put space between herself and her pursuer. She had to calm down anyway. Cube had sent a so-called specialist to dispose of her, but for the past week Murray managed to elude her. She had a special power. In a 10-mile radius, Murray could sense the signature of any magical presence and determine its approximate position relative to her. For instance, as she tapped her foot and waited while the old woman teller shambled into the kitchen, she sensed a lone magical girl a few miles south, probably a drifter who wandered from small town to small town for scraps. The signature of her pursuer would appear to the west in a minute. She could never get too far ahead of her. But Murray expected to be long gone before she fell into any real danger. She just had to not panic like she did in Denver. Her pursuer had never gotten within 5 miles, so she got frazzled when the distance closed, but 5 miles was still a reasonable buffer. Few if any girls could attack from 5 miles away, and at top speed Murray outpaced her. Yet this old woman took her sweet time putting nuggets into a container. As her pursuer appeared on the radar 10 miles away, Murray poured herself an extra-large soda. She had to swallow in several gulps because her parched throat flinched reflexively. High in the air, wind buffeting your face, you got dehydrated fast. Her lips were chapped and her eyes stung. 9 miles, 8 miles. She leaned over the counter and searched for the old woman in the kitchen. Old folks had a hard time, aches, arthritis, senility. She didn't want to be one of those people who complained about the slowness of old people on the highway or in an airport. However, she needed to leave fast.
"Is it almost ready?"
She tried to sound more genuinely curious than impatient, but she sounded impatient.
"A moment, ma'am. You don't gotta call me ma'am."
Her pursuer closed to 6 miles. The location of the kitchen meant the restaurant had no good westward windows. That was an oversight on her part. She should have considered what her view would be from inside before she went in. She went to the closest window, slurped her straw, and pressed her face to the glass to try and see. Nothing but dark sky. 5 miles.
"Here's your order, ma'am."
The old woman trudged toward the counter with a big brown bag that displayed the restaurant's logo. In some ways, the old woman could not have had worse timing. If she took any longer, Murray would have left with the drink and made do. But she returned the exact moment before Murray would have panicked and fled. She still wanted to bolt, but another part of her reasoned, 5 miles is a good buffer still. She had time to grab the bag and scram. It was 4 miles now, but the point stood. She scrambled to the counter and reached over as the old woman approached with ponderous, maddening slowness. It felt like a scene in a movie when the camera slows down to show a bullet whiz past the hero's face. Her hand reached and the fingers closed as the barest tip of the bag entered her range. It was heavier than she expected and she almost dropped it, but she managed to reel it in and turn away. The fast food restaurant was no longer empty. In fact, it had suddenly become crowded. Every seat, from the booths to the tables, held a person. Every single one of those people was a magical girl in full costume. Her mental radar still indicated only 2 magical presences, the vagrant to the south and her pursuer 3 miles west. Her pursuer had stopped closing. Her signature remained fixed. Murray immediately decided the 30 or so magical girls in the room with her were an illusion, a projection meant to distract or disturb her, so she strode toward the exit and made it 4 steps before 2 girls rose out the crowd, grabbed an arm each, and pushed her against the counter.
"Oh, are these your fellow thespians?"
said the old woman. They were physical, capable of holding her, but that only meant they were better illusions than normal. Not that Murray met any illusions before. They had a hodgepodge of costumes styled after all kinds of time periods and themes, but something that unified them was that not one had a soul gem. They all had obvious places where a soul gem should be but no actual gem. That was Hemmett's advice: the first time you meet a magical girl, no matter if you think they're friends or not, make sure you know where their soul gem is. Well, these girls had none and did not appear on her magical radar.
"It's okay,"
said one of the girls who grabbed her.
"We won't hurt you. It'll be better if you don't flee anymore,"
said another.
"Our Lady is forgiving and benevolent,"
said a third who emerged out the crowd with her hands clasped and eyes tilted skyward.
"She believes in the redemption of even the irredeemable."
Some of the crowd murmured in assent, others rolled their eyes or flicked their wrists. Nonetheless, the priest-looking girl continued.
"Each of us was once like you, wayward and prodigal in our excesses, prone to violent thoughts and actions. Somebody shut her up before she goes on forever,"
said someone in the crowd. They turned to Murray and held out hands for supplication.
Sorry, I swear we're not a cult. Only some of us are. Nobody will want to join us if we talk like this. She doesn't have a choice whether to join us. We'll redeem her either way and then she'll see. Call the lady then. We have her subdued."
Nobody called anyone, but at that moment the blip on Murray's radar moved again. She didn't have time to puzzle exactly what the hell was happening, whether these girls were real or projections or what. The big fish, the specialist, was coming. Cold crept up her neck. The 2 girls who held her held tight, but she had managed to maintain her drink and bag in her hands. Her broomstick was tucked under her arm. More advice from Hemmett: if you enter a room, especially at night, make sure you know all the exits. A tidbit given in regard to wraith attacks, because they could appear anywhere. But it was something Murray always took to heart. She knew the restaurant's exits even before the appearance of the 30 magical girls, the entire sheet of windows that covered the facade, the back door at the end of the kitchen, and a sunroof that arched upward. Murray squeezed her XL-sized cup. The cap popped off and the soda gushed out all over her and her left arm's captor's face. Her captor did not relinquish her, but it gave her enough arc of movement to lift her arm and drop her broomstick to the floor. The crowd terminated their argument instantaneously and all 30 faux magical girls dove for her in unison. Some manifested swords, some bows, some guns, some chains, some gauntlets. The old woman yelped and ran into the kitchen far faster than when she prepared Murray's order. 2 miles and closing, she had to think fast, and luckily she had a plan. She held her hands as well as she could in supplication to avoid being instantly gored. Her captors thronged closer around her and eyed her with suspicion, weapons bared. The one she doused with soda wiped her face and hissed about how her hair would get all sticky, and one of the others told her to shut the fuck up. In clustering closer, they had actually obscured their vision of her, because there were so many of them in such a small space. Realistically, only a few could attack at once. And none of them would be able to see the floor, where her broom had fallen.
"Sorry, my hand slipped," she said. "I'm a little nervous."
She had no idea if her delivery were convincing. She never considered herself a strong liar. Hemmett's advice: if you need to, do not hesitate to lie. Most of the enemies did not relax. Someone climbed onto a table in the back to see over everyone else's bobbing head. Between their feet, unknown to them, her broomstick slid, turned, and angled itself. According to Hemmett, because a girl's magic is part of their soul, all magical girls have a telekinetic relationship with the objects they manifest. Many don't realize it, others never hone it, and so maintain only a tenuous psychic grasp over their weapons. Hemmett's power, with her Iron Maidens she closed by clapping her hands, obviously required telekinetic control, so she had placed, what Murray considered, somewhat undue emphasis on the topic. 1 mile. Her pursuer was likely near attack range if she had a projectile weapon. Murray had to act now, and her whole body shook. Hands still held up like she meant no harm, she tried to shake the girls gripping her arms from her with a shake meant to look casual.
"It's okay," she said. "You caught me, I won't resist. You don't need to hold on to me."
She expected little, but amazingly, the girl she had sprayed with coke relinquished her to wipe her face with both hands. Maybe Murray's statement had nothing to do with it. Either way, her opportunity arose. The broomstick shot off the ground and hooked her robes on its thick wooden end. It rocketed her upward, into the sunroof that shattered against her back. The closest magical girls lunged with their swords, but by the time they reacted she already left their reach. Guns fired, but fewer than the total. 5 needles shot into her leg from the knee to her ankle, and they numbed her with some kind of instant venom, but given the circumstances that was a fortunate outcome. She spiraled into the dark night sky, and the only threat she still faced was the magical girl who still held her arm and revolved under her. As the fast food restaurant dwindled, bullets and projectiles shot all around them, and Murray slammed her bag of chicken nuggets into her attacker's head when 0 miles. She twisted her neck, and behind her a black shape swelled. Only a shape, a blackness upon a blackness with no definitive end or beginning, something like broad wings spread, while in the center opened a pure white circle. The broomstick jerked to the side. She swung the girl, clinging to her at the abominable darkness. 2 claws with endless fingers opened on either side of her, and no advice of Hemmett's flared into her mind, no strategic plan of action, only a horrified bestial notion to flee. The broomstick shot forward, and the claws snapped closed, and Murray squeezed her eyes shut and did not die. The claws missed her foot by inches. They closed around the girl who had grabbed her and swallowed her into the dark murk. The girl's arms flailed until they too finally sank. And Murray, bag of junk food in hand, soared into the darkness as the black shape grew smaller behind her. In St. Louis, she finally found Clown Muffle. Together they veered into oblivion. The sheer drop from the top of the gateway arch lasted a second. Murray lost control of her broomstick, and they whirled cyclonic into the darkness until a thicket of bare branches flew up in her face and 1,000 tiny sticks stabbed her entire body. She pulled up hard and prevented smearing herself against the ground, but momentum spiraled her through several more branches into the trunk of a tree. Crack went several ribs as her body peeled off and flopped to the dirt. She spat blood and pushed herself up as fast as her body allowed. A second's horror made her consider that Clown Muffle would already face her, unharmed, having pirouetted to a graceful landing upon one dainty heel, but it seemed even Clown Muffle could sustain a beating. She sagged, halfway a drunkard in position to vomit, and swayed upon an ankle that looked unhinged until she found a trunk to support herself. Blood drenched her tuxedo, a lot of it dried, although she like Murray had twigs spearing her face. One eye was shut. She raised her fists like a boxer. When Murray broke into Clown Muffle's apartment and got into her account, she learned Clown Muffle had a problem. Something with her soul gem, something that stopped her from transforming. That gave Murray an edge. From her robes she whipped a stark, smooth wand and sprouted a ribbon of coiling purple Clown Muffle's way. A twinge of ignobility about the affair streaked through Murray's muddled conscience, the idea that since her cause was correct she ought to champion it without resorting to kicking a girl when she was down, but on the other hand Hemet was the one who cracked her gem to begin with, so this fight was less an ambush and more a continuation of the confrontation in the orange grove. At least she had plenty of time. Cube's specialist had fallen at least 5 minutes behind. Clown Muffle's swaying body swayed in the exact perfect way, with the absolute minimum of wasted motion, to dip between Murray's magic coils and close the distance between them. She came at Murray with a raised fist that stopped short an inch from her nose as her closed eye opened and she said,
"Oh. It's only you. Only me. I thought you were the handmaiden." "The who?"
A shoe slammed into Murray's throat and pinned her against the tree. Clown Muffle held her there with only her foot but did not press any further despite Murray's windpipe being close to the pressure needed to collapse.
"I'm glad you're here,"
said Clown Muffle.
"We'll need many magical girls to eradicate this threat."
Murray tried to speak and found herself incapable. Her hands gripped at Clown Muffle's shoe. An unnameable pit of despair burst in her innards. Even with her soul gem, even with those injuries, still. Clown Muffle tilted back her head to survey the surroundings. The moment she did so, the dark reaches between the ashen trees lit up with a smorgasbord of fanfare and lights. Calliope music warbled through the strained airwaves of the miasma. Plaster horses painted with fiery eyes bobbed up and down along the lazy rotation of a merry-go-round. On the other side, the painted face of a gigantic clown lit up with carnival bulbs. Bumper cars lurched and bumped deeper in. Faded burgundy tent canvas streamed in long lines between the branches. Murray had to squint to make sense of everything, and even then it made no sense.
"The miasmas had time to alter the topography," said Clown Muffle.
Throughout the carnival rides, the flickering heads of wraiths ebbed into existence.
"All right, Hemet. I clear the merry-go-round. You handle the bumper cars."
She pulled her foot from Murray's throat, ripped a branch from overhead, and pranced amid the prancing ponies. Before Murray even had time to gasp air back into her lungs, she had already killed 2, 3 wraiths. Meanwhile Murray seethed, apoplectic, a word she always loved because it sounded like apocalyptic, and right now both words quaked together in her mind. She snatched her wand, which she had dropped when Clown Muffle kicked her, and immediately loosed a bolt at Clown Muffle's back. And yet Clown Muffle dove forward at that moment to spear another wraith, and Murray's attack fizzled in sparks against the mirrored central column of the merry-go-round. Her entire body bristling as she fired magical burst upon magical burst at Clown Muffle, who, despite not even looking at Murray, not even acknowledging her, completely engaged in combat with the wraiths, still escaped every single attack, every single one. Nothing Murray did had the slightest potency. It was as though she did not exist as a tangible entity. She was a gust of wind that sometimes whistled but did nothing more than muss one's hair, and she wanted to sag to her knees and choke on her own horrid laughter because she had come all this way, flown through 4 or 5 states, begged for grief cubes, scraped out of an encounter with one of Kyubei's specialists. It didn't fucking matter, it never mattered. In a distant world, she and Hemet had imagined a guerrilla movement, something underground, hopping state to state like Che Guevara on his motorcycle. With Muri's broomstick and radar they could do it. Dispensing justice to cruel magical girls who did terrible things for their own gain. People would hear about them online, supporters would join. In the real world, the world in which humans lived and from which magical girls were excluded, the revolutions had already happened. The terrible forms of government had fallen and better, not perfect, but better, forms had risen, mechanisms emerged for regular people to protest and petition for change. Always changing, always slowly getting better, eradicating fleck by fleck injustice and inequity. Yet how had the world of magical girls progressed since the dawn of time? Had the lives of magical girls improved one iota? Nope. Same garbage since the beginning. Magnet claimed to help magical girls, but it was all bullshit. If nobody took risks, if nobody sacrificed. So she had to strike down that fucking psychopath even if it destroyed her. She reared up, jumped between two oozing wraiths, and rolled onto the spinning floor of the merry-go-round. Where'd the bitch go? On the opposite end of the ride, kicking a plaster pony, to bend and then break the pole that pinned it in place, which she then divested of its horse by smashing it against the ground. The pole caved wraith skulls far better than the branch, although Murray wondered how it was possible to fight wielding what ought to be an abstraction or hallucination formed by the miasma. It made her wonder how she could be standing and spinning on a merry-go-round that didn't exist, and while the metaphysical implications halted her a moment, they ultimately did not stop her tiptoe toward Clown Muffle. She figured she needed to draw close, while the wraiths preoccupied her, attack at a range where she could not possibly miss, although it wasn't like a single attack from her dinky wand would finish Clown Muffle off, it'd at least be a start, the slightest victory, something to restore a scrap of her sanity. And somehow it worked. She managed 2-3 steps closer. 4 steps. Her hand shook and she had to grip it by the wrist not to go nuts and attack too early. The wraiths and Clown Muffle consumed their respective attentions, and the only thing Murray had to fear was that Clown Muffle would capriciously gallivant somewhere else at the last moment. Soon, cleaved to the mirrored center, Murray stood at Clown Muffle's back. She raised the wand end.
I said the bumper cars, Hemet. I will handle the merry-go-round.
Murray went nuts.
You killed Hemet.
Her magic flashed out, Clown Muffle sidestepped, a wraith burst into cubes.
But, said Clown Muffle, I saved you.
Although her pursuer paused briefly a short distance back, probably atop the arch, Murray knew she had little time remaining. But she could barely see any more, her eyes stuffed with tears. She chucked the worthless wand and went at Clown Muffle with her fists, which hit nothing as Clown Muffle ducked under and scooped her up by the waist. She kicked and flailed as her body was hefted onto Clown Muffle's shoulder, and Clown Muffle continued fighting the wraiths as before, bouncing around as though Murray weighed nothing and swinging her giant pole with one arm like it weighed nothing too.
Wraiths are the true monsters,
said Clown Muffle, as though it resolved everything. Murray emitted a noise that belied description. It was not enough to lose. She had to be transformed into a joke. The kind of gag in a half-rate comedy movie. After a few seconds, Clown Muffle cleared the immediate area of wraiths. By which point new figures appeared in the shadows. Brighter, prettier, more colorful figures, still little more than a blear in Murray's eyes. She guessed easily enough who they were. As before, they created no signal on her radar.
Fellow magical girl,
said one.
Please step away from that magical girl you have on your shoulder. She is a dangerous criminal. Certainly not dangerous,
said Clown Muffle.
RTTTHHHRRRRGHH,
said Murray.
We mean it,
said a second.
That chick's slated by Cubey for termination. Hand her over. She reformed,
said Clown Muffle.
No need for all that. Fellow magical girl, we are not authorized to terminate you. However, we will take physical action if you persist in defying us.
Murray gave up struggling against Clown Muffle's hold. She sagged and sobbed as Clown Muffle pointed her pole at several of the foremost girls one after another.
Shameful. A miasma this large and so many of you. Yet you would rather hunt this cute witch than fulfill your duty as magical girls. Trash. I must bend you into shape. You seriously wanna fight? There's 32 of us, dumbass, that ain't even counting the lady who's strong as all us combined. Burn her.
Force heaved into the pit of Murray's stomach as Clown Muffle bounced off the merry-go-round and swung her pole at the closest of the specialist's projections. The dismal sink of despair swelled in Murray's soul gem. She was too depressed to even watch and entertained thoughts of collapsing into the law of cycles rather than endure this humiliation. What a worthless way to die, though. Wouldn't she rather be a martyr? A martyr to what and why grew increasingly abstracted, blurred with simpler thoughts of vengeance, but it wasn't until the first of the specialist's girls managed a hit on Clown Muffle, glancing, yes, but a hit, that she perked up her head and blinked her eyes clear and considered the ways to turn the situation to her advantage. End of chapter. Chapter end.